everybody, I'm author R.G. Long, and do you remember like that first RPG video game that you played, or maybe just a video game that had a story that absolutely sucked you in and you enjoyed every bit of it? I know for me and all of my fantasy nerddom, like I was really starting to enjoy some of these games that had a bit more than just bad guy that way, shoot them. And I remember the very first one for me was one where my family was walking around this flea market on the way back from a family vacation. And I remembered I had some money kind of burning a hole in my pocket. I still kind of struggle with budgeting, let's be real. But I found this Super Nintendo game that was like, this looks pretty cool. I want to pick this up. And I actually remember getting in trouble when I got home because instead of like helping the family unpack from the really long vacation we had just come back from, I went straight to the TV, put in my brand new video game and started playing Final Fantasy II. Or, I mean, let's be real, it's supposed to be Final Fantasy IV, right? If we're doing the numbers like they're supposed to be. But I remember putting in this video game and absolutely loving it. And just being sucked in by the story. Now, I mean, we're looking at this, right? The graphics aren't fantastic. They're definitely Super Nintendo graphics, and not even really the best Super Nintendo graphics. But it didn't matter to me, because to me that story caught my attention and it pulled me in. And I remember what was so fun about this particular game was that there were people who had jobs that they were filling within the game. You had Cecil, who was like the main fighter, and he went from Dark Knight to Paladin. You had Palom and Porum, who were white and black mages. You had other people who were filling in there, Rydia, who was a summoner and a black mage, Edward, who was a bard. Some really, really neat characters that kind of filled these job roles, and I loved them. And so I was really excited when I got to play Final Fantasy Tactics on the PlayStation, because what this game did for me was it kind of removed the idea that my characters had to be a specific job, and it allowed me as the player to choose their jobs. And I just remember that being so fascinating to be like, oh, you mean my main character doesn't have to be like a sword guy? He can be a chemist? Well, that's cool. I want to do that. Or, you know, hey, this side character over here who's you're kind of hinting at being a support character? No. This side character is going to be my toughest fighter. And so real quick, I want to list for you my top 5 Final Fantasy job classes. I'm going to get to some more stuff here in a little bit, like at the end, just like a caveat or two, but really I'm going to be pulling from the classic job list. Okay, so if you're looking at this and you're looking at it and thinking, well, you're missing some of the newer ones, I know, we're talking classics here. Okay, so my top 5 Final Fantasy jobs, because there were a lot of them. I mean, let's be real, I didn't get my hands on Final Fantasy V until it came out for the PlayStation. Now, like I said, Final Fantasy 2/4 was kind of a big deal to me, all right? And so then I came upon Final Fantasy 3, what's supposed to be 6, and I didn't realize that there was like a gap in the middle until later on, when I was understanding that I was getting the Western versions of these games, and there was the Eastern versions that were there was a game in the middle of it. And when I finally got my hands on Final Fantasy V, I loved all the jobs that you could pick as well. So I thought it was really cool to go from the tactics version of that tactical RPG to the more traditional side view turn-based combat. And hey man, I was all in for these jobs and figuring out which ones would help me beat which bosses and temples and things like that. Oh, it was great. So my top 5 Final Fantasy jobs. Number 5 is the knight. Oh, he's this way. I should point like this. Just the plain knight. And honestly, for me, there was no better hitter. right? Because I understood that like the classes like ninja and some other ones like this could do more damage if you kind of got them the right way. But for me, a knight was one of my favorite fighters because they could put on all the armor, take a lot of hits, and absolutely go to town with the sword and shield. Plus, let's be real, like the more traditional side of me who loves fantasy always kind of envisioned that there would have to be a knight in the party. So as a knight class was always super fun for me. And thinking about all this stuff they could do. And even in Final Fantasy V, figuring out that they could do a move where they could bash with their shield. Yes, please. That was awesome. I always thought that was super, super cool. So a knight was always fun for me, not just because of the role that it took, but also just because of the power they were able to pack behind it. I always thought that was great. And then after the knight was absolutely the black mage. I enjoyed the offensive spells that a black mage could offer whenever you got into combat. Like, and I knew that they were going to be weaker and they needed some other people who were going to help them out, but you would inevitably come upon that enemy or boss that was weakest to magic. And not just like all magic, but maybe one specific kind, like only fire spells, so like fire, faraga, or however you're supposed to say it. Those were my favorite. And so whenever I got that black mage, the offensive spell caster job, I always made sure I had all the spells. Like, that was super important to me, to make sure that I could cast whatever spell was needed in whatever circumstance and get it to what it needed to happen, because you never knew what you were going to come up against. And I knew that my black mage was going to help me out and be with me in the battle. That said, I always thought the summoner was super dope. Now, like playing now, like Final Fantasy VII Remake and stuff, and getting to summon the character and then like be Ifrit or Rama or all that stuff, like, yes, please, like, bring that on. I love that stuff. And even in Final Fantasy VIII, when you could summon the bigger bads and have them use their moves and stuff, like, that was super cool. But even in the traditional senses of the game, I really enjoyed the summoner because you could bring in a super powerful, like, one-time hit to your bad guys, and that would be great. So if you had, you know, this Ice Queen who you're supposed to be fighting, and you had Ifrit, you could just absolutely go to town with that and get that huge explosive magic. So again, the black mage could deliver and was doing what I needed to do, but I wanted that summoner on my team so that I could call in really the ones that looked super cool. And so I always thought the summoner class was really great. And you might be seeing a theme here, like, of magic users, because yeah, I really enjoyed some magic on my team, but I knew if I had magic on my team, I needed healers, right? Because like, your knights were fantastic, they could bring the offense, it was great. Your black mage would be fantastic for bringing on the offensive spells. Your summoners could deliver like that big blow that really took down the enemy, but oh my gosh, you needed some healing, you needed some backup, right? And even as I'm playing like Dungeons and Dragons with my kids, I'm realizing that like they need a healer, like bad. Because you probably have a non-player character in my Dungeons and Dragons quest with my girls that it was just the cleric. Because that white mage was going to heal up your party, and if people got wiped out, they could swoop in with that life spell and bring everybody back, or they could help keep cure going and making sure that it happened, or if there were any status effects that were affecting your people, they could wipe them out. And so for me, I was always making sure, like, okay, I've got the offensive set, but I need to heal some people. Now, I really can't say that I was really great with strategies of being like, okay, if I cast haste on my party and slow on the enemies, and I can do this and that, like, I really wasn't thinking all of that because my brain just doesn't work that way. Let's be real. But what I could do was at least know that if my group got into a tight spot, I could use my healer to bring my guys back. And so that's what I was really using the white mage for, and absolutely loving the white mage for all of the sustainability that they brought to my party. Because if they weren't around, items were expensive, bro. You gotta pay for those things. Spells, You can just keep on using them. They were great. And so, okay, Knight is number 5, Black Mage 4, Summoner 3, White Mage 2. You would think that like spells would be just the thing that kept on coming up, but my top Final Fantasy job list, absolutely the Dragoon. And like I told you, when I played Final Fantasy 2/4, whatever you want to call it, like the character of Kain was so cool. And just the idea of this person like jumping up and like bringing the spear down on the enemies, like, yeah, that was awesome. And for me, having that one particular character was just super cool. So that when I finally played some games that allowed me to choose whether or not my characters could be Dragoons, I was absolutely going to have some of those power players on my team. Now, what I thought was super cool is that the Dragoons usually would jump up out of combat and come down and deliver a super hard hit. And so it was great because they would allow you to have your person out of harm's way and then come down with a hard hit. Now, granted, they were usually pretty slow, so if you couldn't get them like back up in the air, they might sustain some heavy damage. But again, look at my dude here. If you've got heavy armor on your Dragoon, they're going to be able to last for a little bit. And so I always thought the Dragoon class was the coolest, partly because of the story of what happened with Kain in Final Fantasy IV, but also just because how could you not love a guy with a flying spear, right? That was just super cool. Like, even side note here, I remember playing the Square Enix game Legend of the Dragoons. I actually owned that because I just thought like, wait. They're all Dragoons? Yeah, yes, please, let's do this right now. And so, yeah, side note for there, it was super cool. So those are my like traditional classic job classes that I would always have in my party, that I always want to be playing around. And honestly, I'm enjoying like the renaissance of that stuff that we're getting right now. In seeing like in Bravely Default when you get to choose all of your classes, and not just choose, but I love in this series how the person who holds that job class, the asterisk holder, is such a unique character to that job class. I have loved the Bravely Default games. I own them all, have played them all, working my way through 2 because I am a part-time author, full-time dad, full-time pastor, all that stuff. Yeah, just slowly working there, right? And so you've got the games now that have you the ability to choose your jobs versus the games like Octopath Traveler, where the jobs are set, but you can definitely see who is supposed to be what in your party. So I'm really enjoying all of these games that are really kind of, instead of going away from the traditional job classes to like leaning into them, yes, please, more of that. Hey, did you love the job classes in Final Fantasy? Is that really your jam? Did you have like a favorite one that was always one that you chose for your character, or you would make sure you have in your party? Gosh, I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. Make sure you comment your favorite Final Fantasy job class, or if there's some other things that I'm missing out totally, some other games, do me a favor, put that in the comments too. I'd love to hear from you. Hey, thanks so much for enjoying this and hanging out. And if you enjoy the story of Final Fantasies, maybe you'll enjoy some of the stories in my books. They're down below in the description. You should go and check that out. I'm author RG Long. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the journey.